There comes a precise moment in the human experience when every external structure upon which you have relied appears to crumble into dust. The financial debts multiply, the doors of worldly opportunity slam shut, the people you loved and trusted drift away, and the frightened inner voice of the ego begins to whisper that perhaps, this time, there is truly no way out. If this is your present reality, if you are sitting in the ashes of your former life, I urge you to quiet your racing mind and attend to this spiritual truth with your entire soul. When we study the lives of men and women who have touched the most devastating rock bottoms imaginable, individuals who have lost massive fortunes, beloved families, physical health, and all human hope, we discover a remarkable, infallible spiritual law. Just before the greatest demonstration of their lives, just before their most magnificent return, they all passed through that dark valley where it seemed God Himself had completely abandoned them. The profound and liberating discovery is this: the bottom is not the end. The bottom is, in fact, the solid bedrock upon which the divine mind builds the most powerful comeback a human life can ever experience. What you are about to learn in these pages is not empty, sentimental consolation meant to briefly soothe your feelings. It is a proven, mathematically exact spiritual law. No matter how much you have lost, or how long you have wandered in the darkness, your return is not merely a distant possibility. Under the inviolable laws of spirit, your comeback is already in motion. Consider the case of Stephen. He was 51 years old when the transport company he had built with his own hands entirely collapsed. With 4 of his trucks repossessed, crushing debts owed to 3 different banks, and the agonizing weight of feeling he had utterly failed his family, he spent months sleeping barely 4 hours a night. He would stare at the ceiling in the dark, desperately trying to analyze where he had made the fatal error that destroyed his life. One night, finding a book on spiritual truth left on his table, he opened it without a shred of hope, seeking only a distraction from his insomnia. The very first sentence he read stopped his panicked mind in its tracks. No external condition has power over the one who discovers the truth of their spiritual being. In his devastating situation, those words felt almost offensive to his human intellect. Yet, he continued to read, and in the following pages, he discovered a truth that no financial advisor, accountant, or business counselor had ever taught him. Prosperity does not begin in the bank, nor does it begin in the market. It begins entirely in human consciousness. And consciousness can be transformed in an instant, regardless of the bleakness of present external circumstances. That night Stephen did not sleep either, but for the first time in months, his wakefulness was not born of anguish. It was because a small, undeniable spark had awakened within him. When your life collapses externally, it is because something vastly more important is occurring on the spiritual plane. God does not permit the collapse to destroy you, but to clear the ground. The divine mind is making room to build something that your soul desperately needs, something that your human ego, in its limited vision, would never have chosen for itself. The human mind seeks culprits, logical explanations, and rapid worldly exits. But your first spiritual task in a moment of crisis is not to seek external solutions. Your task is to quiet the mind enough to ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, "What greater good is trying to be born in my life through this experience?" This single question transforms you from a helpless victim into a conscious spiritual being collaborating with the divine plan. Lourdes had spent 3 grueling years attempting to recover from a devastating marital separation that had simultaneously ruined her economic stability. Her business was left deep in debt, and her self-confidence was shattered into pieces. She felt she had lost not only her marriage and her livelihood, but her complete identity. When she was first introduced to these spiritual teachings, she met them with total skepticism. But one specific principle touched a place deep within her. God does not consult your past to determine your future. The return of your life begins with the decision to remain steadfast on the spiritual path, and the primary tool for this journey is scientific prayer. The prayer that transforms conditions is completely unlike the prayer most people learned in their childhood. It is not a desperate supplication hurled toward a distant, reluctant deity. It is not the repetition of memorized words devoid of inner conviction, nor is it an attempt to convince a higher power that you have suffered enough to finally deserve help. Scientific prayer is a precise, deliberate process of mental and spiritual alignment. The illumined practitioner does not beg from a consciousness of lack. they claim from a consciousness of absolute abundance. They do not plead from a state of terror, they affirm from a state of unwavering faith. They do not speak to an external God in the sky, but connect deeply with the divine presence that already dwells within them as their deepest nature. There are 5 essential, chronological elements to all truly effective scientific prayer. You must first recognize and declare that the presence of God is the only true reality and the only actual power operating in the universe, stripping all power away from your debts, your illnesses, or your enemies. You consciously align and unify yourself with that divine presence, recognizing that you are an individualized expression of God. You realize and affirm that the specific good you desire already exists in its fullness on the spiritual plane, right here and right now. You offer genuine, heartfelt gratitude for this good before it is even visible to your physical eyes. Because you know it is already a spiritual fact, you completely liberate the final result, letting go of all human attachment to how or when the good will manifest, leaving the avenues of expression entirely up to divine wisdom. These 5 steps are not a magical ritual. They are the exact description of how the human mind operates when it is in perfect harmony with spiritual law. Consider Casimir, a primary school teacher who carried a burden far heavier than any financial debt, the deep-seated, quiet conviction that his life was destined to be limited, and that abundance was reserved for other people, but never for someone like him. He learned through these teachings that the belief in limitation is the only true poverty, and that this false belief can be dissolved through conscious, sustained prayer. For 40 consecutive days, Casimir practiced the 5 steps of scientific prayer every morning. He did not ask to magically win the lottery or become a millionaire. He prayed for his consciousness to expand beyond the artificial limitations he had blindly accepted. He asked to perceive the divine opportunities that were already present but blocked by his unillumined mind. By the end of that period, his entire self-concept had shifted. Within a year, a small educational materials venture he started had tripled his previous income. But the money was merely an external symbol of the real miracle. The conviction of limitation had been permanently replaced by the calm, unbreakable certainty that he was a child of an abundant Father, and that universal abundance was his natural, inescapable birthright. When we delve deeply into the Sermon on the Mount, we uncover the most precise instructions ever given to humanity regarding how the spiritual law operates. When Jesus stated, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you," he was not offering a vague, comforting promise to the downtrodden. He was giving a highly technical instruction regarding the correct, mathematically exact order of spiritual priorities. The kingdom of God, as it is understood in scientific Christianity, is not a geographical location in the sky that one hopes to visit after death. It is a present state of consciousness. It is the conscious awareness of the divine presence operating actively in every single aspect of your daily existence. When this consciousness is firmly established, all material needs, money, health, right relationships, housing, are satisfied naturally and automatically. This principle completely inverts ordinary human logic. The unillumined, material mind insists, "First I must resolve my severe financial problems, pay off these debts, and find a job, and then I will have the peace of mind to focus on spiritual matters." The spiritual law dictates the exact opposite. You must first establish the spiritual connection, and the material good will flow as a natural consequence. It does not come as a reward for being a good person. It comes as the inevitable, inescapable effect of aligning your mind with the infinite source of all good. The men and women who successfully orchestrate a massive comeback do not do so because they found cleverer worldly strategies. They do so because they discover that real power operates from the inside out. Consider Philomena, who was 63 years old when her eldest son lost the family business they had spent 20 years building. Suddenly, she found herself without income, facing foreclosure on her home, and carrying the agonizing belief that at her age, there was simply no way to start over. She was paralyzed by her son's shame and her own terror. But through the study of truth, she learned a vital principle for the divine mind. The category of too late simply does not exist. The mind of God operates entirely outside of human time and can generate entirely new, unprecedented opportunities at any stage of a person's existence. Philomena began practicing metaphysical treatment every afternoon. She did not pray with desperate begging. She visualized the divine presence actively dissolving the obstacles in their path opening doors they could not yet see. She established the kingdom first, and the subsequent restoration of their lives followed as a matter of law. Metaphysical treatment is the most powerful tool available for situations of profound crisis. Unlike ordinary petitionary prayer, a treatment does not ask God to change something in the external world. Instead, it works directly and exclusively upon the consciousness of the practitioner, dissolving the erroneous mental patterns that are outpicturing as the negative experience. Every difficult external condition, be it bankruptcy, illness, or isolation, has its root in a thought pattern firmly established in the subconscious mind. This is not a punishment from an angry deity, nor is it the whim of blind fate. It is the exact consequence of spiritual law. Sustained thoughts of fear, lack, resentment, or deep self-doubt act as magnetic forces, creating physical conditions that perfectly reflect that internal energy. A standard metaphysical treatment involves a very specific mental action. First, you sit in quietude and recognize that God is the only presence and power. Second, you affirm that this presence is active within you and within the specific situation you are facing. Third, you explicitly deny the real power of the negative condition, recognizing it as a temporary, human illusion with no spiritual backing. Fourth, you affirm the spiritual truth that God's perfect good for this situation already exists and is manifesting now. Finally, you express profound gratitude and release the matter completely to divine wisdom. However, there is an element to this practice that many beginners entirely ignore, to their own detriment. The internal state from which the treatment is performed matters infinitely more than the exact words spoken. Serenity is not a spiritual luxury, it is a strict technical requirement. A treatment performed from a state of panic, urgency, or terror only reinforces the very fear you are attempting to dissolve. You must begin every session with 5 minutes of conscious quietude. Sit down, close your eyes, and breathe until the frantic rhythm of your mind slows. Physically release the tension in your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and relax your hands. You must permit your physical body to communicate to your subconscious mind that the present moment is safe. From this calm center you speak inwardly to God, not as an inferior being begging a distant monarch, but as a beloved child speaking intimately with an infinitely capable father. Abundius was 44 and had been desperately seeking employment in the city for 2 long years. He had accumulated a collection of rejections so vast that he had become convinced something was fundamentally broken within him. When he learned that this very belief, the conviction of his own insufficiency, was the exact obstacle blocking his opportunities, everything changed. He began applying metaphysical treatment specifically to his own self-image. Each morning, from a place of deep physical and mental serenity, he affirmed, "I am a perfect expression of the divine mind, completely equipped for the exact purpose God has for my life." Within 3 months, operating from this newly serene and confident consciousness, he received 2 simultaneous job offers. The problem had never been the labor market, the blockage was entirely in his own mind. To achieve a true spiritual comeback, the work cannot be confined to 20 minutes of formal morning prayer. It requires what we call the practice of the presence of God throughout the entire day. Whether you are washing dishes, driving your car, answering difficult emails, or speaking with your family, you have a choice. You can operate from the consciousness of the frightened, separated human ego, or you can operate from the consciousness of the divine. Most of humanity suffers from severe spiritual amnesia. They know intellectually that God exists, but they conduct their daily affairs as if God were completely absent from their business. This practical disconnection is the root cause of financial crisis, broken relationships, and chronic anxiety. Perhaps the most surprising and resistant teaching for those seeking to rebuild their lives is the absolute necessity of forgiveness. Many students utterly fail to see the connection between forgiving someone who harmed them and improving their own bank account. Yet, the law is absolutely clear. Sustained resentment is one of the most powerful blockages to prosperity in existence. When you hold on to resentment, you remain mentally and energetically chained to the person who harmed you. A massive portion of your creative mental energy is continually occupied by that knot of bitterness. That energy is therefore unavailable to you. It cannot be used to perceive new business opportunities. It cannot be used to rebuild your health, and it cannot maintain the consciousness of abundance required to attract good. The resentful person pays a terrible double price. They suffer when the initial damage is done, and they suffer every single day they keep the grievance alive in their mind. The forgiveness required by spiritual law is not emotional, it is intensely practical. You do not have to feel warm affection for the person who betrayed you, nor do you pretend the event did not happen. You simply recognize that holding them in a mental prison is actively destroying your own life.